Hi, everybody. Welcome to Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're going to be talking about Gunbee F-99.
Yeah, not a flight simulator, as I was predisposed to believe.
It's
I
not.
thought this
It's
would be
also.
a deep one.
It's also not a game about Gumby.
No.
Because if you say it real fast, you might be confused.
Or Pokey. Neither one of them are in here.
Why did Gumby's star fade?
Of course, Gumby made a Clay, and Pokey. In fact, the whole Gumby gang. And those stop-motion Clay animation. Remember when Clay animation, there was a time where it was like a real big deal? I mean,
Yeah,
well past Gumby's phase.
Every year, like the California Raisins Christmas special was a big deal. You saw all that stop-motion stuff.
And Clay Fighter and all that stuff. Clay, and remember Peter Gabriel's videos, there was Clay animation in that. Clay was like it rode high. But I think just straight up, it got overtaken by CGI and stuff. It's hard to get excited about a blob of crud that moves by itself, And what is Gumby? Anyway, he's got a flat head. He's weird. His proportions are weird. How does he grip stuff? He's got no real fingers. Well, he's just a weird guy.
I think Gumby's like an int. He's just like a small int, but he's able to latch on to things, and then the clay just kind of seeps into the pores of whatever he's holding on to.
You might be right. Yeah, that's disgusting if that's true. Man, never lend Gumby your T-shirt or something. He really messed that thing up. That's
what do you
why
think you do with your ergo stick?
No, not good. He'd mess that thing up. And what happens if when he gets on top of Pokey? What's going on there?
Well, you don't want.
I don't even want to know.
No.
Were you into that stuff back in the day? Because
that was
even by my.
Gumby was a little bit before my time. I think.
Me too.
Really?
Yes.
I always like Gumby sort of crested in like the mid to late 70s.
No. I mean, he was on TV, but you got to remember back in those days, for example, when you're a kid, there was a limited amount of kid stuff that it showed that's all we saw, the Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry's from the 50s, like a million times. That's all he had. It's not like they were going to make a whole lot of new stuff. It's a Gumby. Who was the kid with the dog, Goliath and Davy? That's another one that used to be on. You remember them? They were real churchy. You don't remember that one?
No.
So that's another one that they used to play. So we just got everything that had ever been made for kids over like 50 years. That's just what we saw. We saw it all. I even saw Milton Berle and stuff back in the day.
Where do you stand on like the British form of claymation, like Wallace and Gromit and all that stuff?
I mean, I know of it. You know what I mean? But I don't stand on it. I just kind of just let it go. I don't really have an opinion on it. Did you watch a lot of that? They had movies and stuff, right?
Yeah, I watched the movie. There was a movie about, I think it was called like Chicken Run or something like that.
Is that? I don't know. I've heard of that.
Yeah.
I think it had games. Did you play with clay when you were a kid?
No. I mean, no, I didn't. I mean, well, clay is like dirt, right? I mean, I dug holes.
It's not like dirt. Clay is clay. But I mean, you never had a big stick of like art clay to mess around with? Y'all didn't do that?
No. Where do you get sticks of art clay from?
Did you have art classes when you were a kid?
Yeah.
And they didn't give you any sort of clay to sculpt and stuff?
No. Well,
did you ever have Play-Doh?
I remember that I had like a moldable eraser. You ever have one of those? You ever, like when I was in middle school, you go down to Miggy's. Remember Miggy and Company there in Taze Valley? It's on the left side by where the donut shop they opened up was. Anyway, you go there and you get the art kit. And you spend like lots of money on this art kit. Then you take it to middle school art class and you use about 3% of what's in the kit. But the rest of the stuff is just really cool stuff. And so I remember this eraser, and the eraser was like moldable into different objects. It was sort of like clay. And I remember it smelled really weird.
So you're telling me, John Bodekar Schaller, that in your whole life you've never taken a big block of clay and went like blah?
No, like for example, the Lionel Richie video where he's blind and he makes the girl's head. I always wanted to be that guy.
You want to be blind?
Yeah, and making girls' heads. I mean, that would be awesome.
Something tells me you would do a horrible job. You've never touched clay. Something tells me that he had years of experience before he actually went blind. He had like years of being a pupil to some art master. Did you ever play with Silly Putty?
Yes, I remember Silly Putty, because what you could do is you could take the funnies and you could mash it on there, and then you lift it off, and you got the funny right there on the Silly Putty.
That's right, and you could also it would bounce if you made it into a ball. You could bounce.
That's something that needs to. Does Luke have any Silly Putty around?
No, we don't want that. You know why? As a parent, you hate it because they can like grind it in the carpet, feed it to the pets.
That's true.
Do all kinds of crazy crap,
Yeah, you probably end up with a lot of cat hair on the silly putty, and that's no good.
Oh man, I really, legitimately, I'm stunned that you've never done anything with clay. Did you not take art classes when you're like in kindergarten or in the summer? You know,
No.
my mom had me and stuff using pipe cleaners.
I think Hurricane was a lot more attuned
to
the art than when you were a child. They
am an artiste.
Yeah,
I went to art classes every summer. So did the boy. Went for many years to art classes. And did you ever do anything like where you use glass or make any glass stuff or
like
stuff
a mosaic or like
that's right, or like stained glass stuff like that, like in Scouts? You were in Scouts forever. You didn't do any of this stuff.
I think when I was in Boy Scouts, I'm trying to think about the artistic endeavors that we embarked upon.
Yeah, what did you get I guess you didn't get the clay badge.
I don't think I got the art merit badge, to be honest with you. I don't think you needed that one for Eagle. So I lost out. Now I will say, my dearly departed father, he was a stained glass man. That's what he did after he retired. Yeah. So if I'm ever in the mood, I can head on over to the house there and get all the stained glass supplies I could ever want.
You cheesed out in the art area because of your stupid interest in music. That's how you got around it. That's exactly what it was. So you got hosed from the glory. For Christmas, I'm buying you a big chunk of clay. That's my goal this year.
Do you have a favorite medium to work in?
It's clay. You got to have some clay. It's fun because you smush it. You feel powerful, but then you feel artistic because after you smush it, you look at it and you go like, that's art.
Did you ever have the opportunity to do the thing with the foot pedal, and you're making the pot?
My aunt does that stuff. I don't
know what that's called. What do you call that?
Pottery.
Pottery.
That's what they call it.
It's an exotic word for that.
She makes ashtray. I mean, I made ashtrays. Every little kid made an ashtray when I was a kid.
I see. Actually, now that you mention it, I do sort of recall making an ashtray at some point
there you
in
go.
my life. Yeah.
There you go. So just your mind's going, Boat.
Yeah,
it happens.
It is. All right, Aaron. It's time to talk about Gunbee.
Oh yeah, man, that's a good one. That's a good tune, Boat.
It is. So, Gunbee F-99. So this is a vertically scrolling shooter for the Amiga, one player only, Aaron. That was released in 1998. A late release, some might say, for the Amiga.
Yeah.
This is it's a port of a 1991 arcade game called Detana Twinbee, which is otherwise known as Bells and Whistles in Europe. I don't believe this game ever got a North American release, and my guess is that it was only released in America as a conversion kit because, like you said, you had a little bit of trouble. You couldn't track down any sort of a cabinet or anything for this, could you?
No, I couldn't. Now, I did not know its Japanese name, so I just simply looked for Bells and Whistles, and I did not see any actual dedicated Bells and Whistles cabinets.
Yeah. And so, but anyway, before we get into Gunbee, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Twinbee because I think it's kind of interesting. Detana Twinbee is actually the 5th game in the Twinbee series.
Wow.
But parts 2, 3, and 4 were only released on home consoles, which is kind of crazy to think about. You have an arcade series that launches in the arcade, then it goes home for a couple games, and then it comes back to the arcade on its 5th iteration. Can you think of another game that did that?
That went from the arcades to the house and then back?
And then back to the arcade.
I can't right off the top of my head. I was just thinking it when you were saying that. I've got the MSX in here beside me. Something tells me that maybe I might be able to play some of those other versions. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah. In fact, I believe that all of the versions, all 2, 3, and 4 were all released on the MSX.
Yeah.
So it'll be in good shape.
Yeah.
So Detana Twinbee was created and published by the Konami team. Back in the 80s, of course, in the early 80s, 82, 83, you had one of the most seminal shooter games ever released. And that game, of course, is Xevious. Xevious with its, it's scrolling, plus you can move all over the screen. You're not limited to just moving back and forth. It has bombing, it has shooting, it has colorful enemy patterns. It really took shooting games to the next level. Wouldn't you agree that it was sort of the next level past your Galaxy and Galaga, all that stuff?
You know, well, I mean, it's a different sort of game than those, but it's certainly, there's a lot more flexibility in it. A great game. As you know, I'm a big fan of that one. So, yeah, and you can see the influences for sure.
Right, right. And, of course, Xevious, published by Namco, Konami across the street is like, man, we got to get in on some of that action.
Yeah.
And so what they did was they divided up into 2 teams, and they sent one team off, and they said, okay, you guys are going to create a horizontally shooting game, kind of like Scramble. We need you to take Scramble to the next level. And then this other team, they say, okay, we want you to take what you like about Xevious and create your own game around Xevious-style mechanics. What did the Scramble team create? Well, they created a little minor hit called Gradius.
Oh, man. I think they won the competition.
And what did the horizontal or the vertically scrolling shooter team come up with? They came up with Twinbee. So Twinbee and Gradius released almost simultaneously, one being the horizontal shooter, one being the vertical shooter. And, of course, in the States, there's no question which is the most well-known. Gradius is a very famous game. It was released with multiple sequels, multiple iterations, multiple names. The second Gradius game, I believe, was released as Life Force in the United States.
It's a good one, too.
And but Twinbee never once, as far as I can tell, never once graced the shores of North America. It got that the 5th game, of course, released for the arcades. Now, the second game in the Twinbee series was released in the United States by Konami. It's known as Stinger, and it's a little bit weird. Did you ever play Stinger for the NES?
I've heard of it, but I don't think I've played it, Bo.
So Stinger starts out, you're in the little Twinbee craft, but you start out as it starts out as a horizontally scrolling shooter, and then it changes in the second stage to be vertically scrolling. So it kind of goes back and forth. It's a little bit weird. But all of the other Twinbee games past the second one stick with that vertically scrolling type of thing. It is worth noting that, you know, you can kind of pigeonhole these games and say, well, Gradius is the more, you know, serious game. It's set in space with aliens, you know, man stuff, aliens.
Yeah.
And, Twinbee is more that cutesy aesthetic. You know, people call them cute 'em ups or whatever. Gradius actually has a whole series of games with the Twinbee aesthetic called Parodius. I don't know if Parodius is they're weird games, and that is sort of the Twinbee kind of influence on the Gradius universe. So anyway, getting back to Detana Twinbee, the music in this game was done by Michiru Yamane. She, Aaron, might be the most famous female video game composer of all time. Okay. Yeah. Are you familiar with this name? I want to ask you before.
I'm not familiar.
Not only did she do the music for this game, but she composed one of the most iconic scores of all time and one of my favorite soundtracks. I had no idea that she did this until I was doing research. She did the music for Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And you want to talk about a knockout soundtrack? That is a knockout soundtrack.
I know it's much ballyhooed, that's for sure.
She also did the music for the JRPG Suikoden 3 and the more modern fighter Skullgirls. You ever hear about Skullgirls?
It's funny, we just talked about that. I've not played it, but I know it got a lot of attention, so I'm looking forward to see what it looks like. So I've not seen it yet.
Yeah, so anyway, she did the music for that. So the music in this game, I think, is pretty good. And there's a reason why. So anyway, we're still talking about Detana Twinbee. We haven't gotten to Gunbee yet. The thing that sets Detana Twinbee apart from other vertically scrolling shooters, well, just name, what's the first thing that comes in your head, Aaron, that sets this game and this series apart?
Well, I mean, for me, it's just that it's really goofy. That's
and now what do you mean by goofy?
I mean, it's you called it the cute 'em up. I can see why this didn't get released in the States because of people like me who are you said more manly shooters. That's what I like. This is much more cutesy, you know, much more anime sort of based when you start up than than your average the shooters that we have grown up with or been used to when this came out.
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely got a cheerful kind of cartoony vibe.
Yeah.
There's a, you're instead of flying across a barren hellscape like you are in every other shooter, you're flying across sort of the open. It looks sort of like European, like castles and stuff.
Big puffy clouds. It's actually very pleasant. I will say that.
Yeah. And of course, the game is set in this bright, happy world where you control one of two flying ships. You got Twinbee and Winbee. They didn't venture far out into the realm of creativity.
Yeah.
They just dropped the T, and Winbee became the second ship. So anyway, these ships are like, you would think that they would be B-shaped. I wouldn't really call these B-shaped. How would you describe the shape of your craft in this game?
They almost look like maybe like, those one-man subs that you can see, or like the robotic underwater
like
sub.
a submersible type of thing.
Yeah, something like that. That's what they were sort of remind me of. They don't look like a bees.
And they've got full-on like cartoonish arms, complete with gloves.
Yeah, the white glove treatment is in effect.
That's right. And what do you do with your arms? Well, you use them to throw bombs, of course. So that's pretty cool.
Literally, you just drop like grenades.
That's right. That's right. And of course, that's the whole Xevious thing, is that you've got ground and air-based tactics in this game. Now, before we go any further, Aaron, had you played Bells and Whistles before this week?
It's funny you should ask, because I've been killing myself. I've played it now. But there's these things sort of run together for me. But it seems like I would have remembered the opening and stuff in this, and I don't remember it. So I'm guessing I never tried this one, Bode.
Okay.
And with a name that, I wouldn't even know what it was. So that
this is a game that I first started playing when I built my MAME cabinet down here in the basement. And I found it because on when I had my hyperspin set up, Bells was pretty close to the top, and I'm always looking for shooters to play because that's the best thing to do on the arcade machine. And since B is up there, I was like, hey, Bells and Whistles. And man, I've played the heck out of this thing for years. So I am in a pretty unusual position this week on Amigos, having had plenty of experience with the source material, which I don't get to say very often. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of this game. So you blast your way through each level. And as you can see, in addition to the enemies, you also have these big puffy clouds that are everywhere. And when you shoot the clouds, bells come out of the clouds. And this is your classic kind of church bell, Liberty Bell style bell that comes out of here. Okay. And you have options at this point. You can either collect the bells for points, or you can shoot them. And when you shoot them, they kind of bounce back up in the air. And if you shoot them enough, they change color, and when they change color, depending on what color they change, they give you various power-ups, or if you shoot the bell and it becomes black, it gives you a power down, which is no good. That's the bells in the Bells and Whistles title. I don't know where the whistles are. I don't know if that was a thing or not. So anyway, the game did great in Japan. There was a trade publication called Game Machine. It listed Detana Twinbee on their March 15th, 1991 issue as being the third most popular arcade game at the time. So it did pretty well in the charts. Detana Twinbee was also responsible for launching the game series into other media. Even though this was the fifth game, this was the one that really was the breakout success for the series. Aaron, there was a radio drama. That's right, a radio drama.
Well, you can tell when it starts up and all that stuff, in this little cutscenes, you can tell that there's something going on story-wise. So I'm assuming the drama would be coming from those characters.
Yeah, I thought that would tickle you because I know you're a big fan of that.
I do like that, especially considering this came out in the 80s and the early 90s. That was just any radio drama is pretty unique.
Yeah, and so they used that opportunity to flesh out the characters. So the characters are now named Light and Pastel. The pilots of Twinbee, Light and Pastel.
Man. That could be worse.
They have to defeat the forces of the evil alien Iva and save the planet Meru after receiving an SOS message sent by Princess Melora. There's a lot of names in there.
Yeah,
there was also an anime that ran for a couple seasons in 98 and 99 called Twinbee Paradise. So that actually lined up with the Amiga release of Gunbee. Who knows? Maybe that was sort of what spurred it on. The game was ported first to the Sharp X68000. And then to a variety of other systems, including the PC Engine and the MSX, the PlayStation. Those are the official ports. Now, Aaron, it's time to talk about the unofficial ports. And by that, I mean our Amigos Game of the Week, Gunbee F-99.
Yes, because you said that. I'm interested to hear the story on this.
Yeah. So if you want to switch that over to the other one, we can start talking about the development of this game. This was developed by Twin Eagles, okay? Twin Eagles, where do they hail from? Well, they hail from Peru, Aaron. Peru. Land of Machu Picchu, okay?
Yeah.
They are responsible for several well-known and not so well-known hacks and various bootleg games, Aaron.
I love it.
The majority of their hacks are sprite and title screen hacks where, you know, they do the old shtick. They put Sonic in a Mario game or the other way around.
Yeah.
They're according to the internet, Aaron, they're most famous for Speedy Gonzales Los Gatos Banditos. They hacked Sonic into that game and they released it as Sonic the Hedgehog 4 on the Super Nintendo.
I love it. I love it.
So many of these hacks, Aaron, were actually commissioned works, you know, because you got to remember, before the days of the internet, people were making ROM hacks, and it wasn't like they could just distribute them on the internet. What did they do with these things? Well, what they would do was they would give the master ROM to resellers across the world, and then those resellers would make cartridges and distribute the games in various, you know, underground facilities like the flea market. So that's how they made their money. They would hack these ROMs, they would burn the ROMs, they would make the cartridges, and then they would sell those to, you know, shady distributors all over the world. And that's how these hacks got around. Did you ever see any sort of, you know, these sort of hacked cartridges back in the day?
You know, no, in a word, because I've lived in West Virginia. We could barely get the real things to come here. But I would wager that the market for things like that wasn't here. I would say. I mean, I never saw any hacked cartridges. I'm not sure I've ever seen any, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some. You know, with the NES carts, you get Action 52 and some of the shadier releases, like the Codemasters releases that were, you know, not released with the Nintendo seal of approval,
like 10-gen stuff.
Right? So, yeah, stuff like that.
I've
you see that at the flea market.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never seen any like real hack cartridges before. As far as I can tell, Gunbee is the only Twin Eagles release for the Amiga. So they got on the Amiga and they got off it right away. This is, of course, an unlicensed port of Detana Twinbee. It was published by APC and TCP, which is a German outfit. And they still exist to this day. You can go there and you can buy software for the Amiga from apctcp.de, I believe is their name. And so they are still in existence. And this was it was originally debuted as a one-level demo called Amigos. And it promised a 2-player option, but when the full Gunbee game was released, the 2-player mode was scrapped. Just a 1-player only game. This is an AGA only title, which you'd think, you know, in 98 people were really only, I think, producing games for AGA at this point. Yeah. Now, looking at this game, it definitely looks good. You know, could this game be released on an OCS chipset? I am going to tend towards, I'm going to err towards yes. I think with the, you know, the magicians that are at work these days producing like that Final Fight clone and Kung Fu Master and all that stuff, it seems like this game is not out of the OCS realm of possibility. What do you think, Aaron?
I would agree with you. And the thing, this game is not what I would call a speed demon either. No. And so I would not be surprised that you could do it without too much of a difference. But I'm sure it was easier. I mean, why not use the fresh thing like we talked about before?
Yeah.
But, I mean, it does look pleasant. They in terms of using the HEA, I don't know how much they had to use it, but it looks nice.
Yeah, and so there's 2 modes here. You can play this game in honey mode or story mode. To be honest with you, there's really no difference. I think the only difference,
ask about that.
The only difference that I could find is that you are, well, let me tell you about the story first of all. Okay, here's the story, because they didn't use the story from the Japanese version. They wrote their own story for this game.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Somewhere in the universe, Volstix is being involved in a chaos I'm leaving all the typos in, by strange beasts and weird machines. Leading the attack, Lord Kenmare wants to steal the 5 crystals owned by the beautiful princess Akiko. Akiko is worried about the Lord's plans, as the crystals can supply enough power to conquer whole planets. But Lord Kenmare's patience is over. He order to his favorite pet, Kangri, Aaron, to visit Akiko's royal city. Helped by his savage beasts, the Lord take possession of the crystals and kidnaps the Princess Akiko. Sad for a loss of her best friend, Kiara Maguire will lead the assault to save Akiko and take back the crystals and fight against Kenmare's beasts. The engineers designed the ultimate instrument of destruction, Gunbee F-99.
Well, that is a story. I'm not gonna lie to you. I had trouble following that.
Listen, if you didn't understand the story, don't worry, because this game is a game that does not need or require a story. The difference between story mode and honey mode is they mentioned some crystals in here. You can shoot crystals out of clouds and dump them into buckets instead of dumping the bells into buckets for extra points in honey mode. That, as far as I can tell, is the only difference. So, Aaron, I've given you the background. I've given you the mind-bending story. Tell me, what do you think about Gunbee F-99?
You know, again, when we first picked this, I thought this was a flight simulator because the F-99. I thought, man, Gunbee, what an odd military, name for a jet. So I was pleasantly surprised that it was this. I told you last night, Bo, never has a game that was so easy been so hard. This game is irritating because it doesn't move at a quick clip. It sort of meanders, but at the same time, things are hard to avoid. It's a real strange game. I will say I got better at it the more I played it, and once I understood some of the mechanics and stuff. But it's an odd game. Now, for a game that was released, I don't know, did you say, are we officially calling this public domain? Or it's
No.
This was a boxed release game.
This was a commercially released title. I looked at old EAB discussions, English Amiga board discussions.
Yeah.
And there was a thread on this in 2008. Gunbee was still being sold on the distributor website for the princely sum of €2.
Hey, that's a steal.
Yeah.
But listen, if you're into a game where you fight flying lobsters and vegetables and stuff, you might, or you like this sort of aesthetic in a game. And really, I'll be honest with you, when I first fired this up, I wasn't exactly licking my chops, Bode. But as I played it, the bell gimmick, that's a good gimmick. It reminds me, I believe it was Galaga 88 that had one of the bonus stages, had you bouncing this thing up in the air to spell bonus over and over. And it sort of reminded me of that with the bells. I like the bell angle. It works better in the arcade version than it does in this, I think. But that's fun. It's something you can do while you're actually playing the game. It's like almost like a side game that you do just to see how many times you can whack it, but the games, it's funny, the bombing aspects of the game, I don't want to say they seem like, I'm not saying they felt like they were tacked on, but I mean, they didn't seem as important as the shooting. Maybe it's just, I didn't get super far into the game. Maybe it becomes a bigger deal, but once you figure out that to bomb stuff, to get fruit and stuff is a big deal, at least that gave the bombing a little more purpose. The creatures you fight are goofy, but I mean, they're not as random flying idiots as we see in some of the games we play. I mean, they come down in formations and stuff. It's not something like a Blood Money or something. So they're nice. The backgrounds are good. I like the clouds and stuff. They did a good job with that part of it. They're not going to be able to capture. Well, I mean, I guess they weren't even trying to capture. It's hard to say if they're trying to capture what the arcade game was. I mean, I don't know. I'll get your opinion in a minute. But the arcade game had rich, lavish backgrounds, multi-planar. You'd look down and see, you know how it is, nice and beautiful. And there's no way you're going to get that on here. But they did make it look nice, you know. And this is a real game. I mean, for some crazy Peruvian bootleggers, this is a decent little game. It's got decent graphics, and the control's good. It's sort of unforgiving, you know, but and it's tough. I found it very difficult. I found it much harder than the arcade game's first couple levels. But I did get better, and I did enjoy it, Bo. Well, what did you think about it?
Well, I'll tell you what I like and what I don't like. So graphic-wise, this game is a triumph. I really think that, you know, you're right. It doesn't capture all of the nuance of the arcade game, but as far as, you know, for being an Amiga conversion, it really looks good. It really looks good. I think that they did a great job of, you know, showing you all of the different, like you said, they brought all the, you know, bunch of the different enemy types over. They give you a lot of options at the beginning of the game. You can play this thing in NTSC or PAL. They've included a bunch of the animated intro stuff, which is cool.
Keyboard, joystick, one or two buttons.
You got a lot of options, and I appreciate that. I think that's really cool. I would have appreciated a difficulty menu for sure. This game is insanely difficult, and I really think you hit the nail on the head, because if you're watching a playthrough of this game, you're going to think, boy, why is this difficult? Because the game does not scroll quickly. In fact, when you start a level, the game moves at an awesome clip. I mean, you're really moving along, and you're like, yeah. Well, guess what? As soon as the enemies show up, the game crawls to almost a halt. The scrolling speed it goes way down.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, you just sort of meander along from there.
And that's by design. It's not like the Amiga can't handle it. They made it like that. It's slow. Right. It puts it in super slow mode. I mean, if you think about it, if you're driving through space and all of a sudden you see a fleet of crap, you're going to slow way down. So I'll buy it.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Now, the game is the enemies, you know, they're not really out to get you. This game is really unique among shooters because the enemies are just kind of going about their business for the most part.
Well, they're out to shoot you, though.
Every once in a while, they'll shoot a bullet. I don't recall there ever being more than one bullet on the screen at a time, and the bullet will sort of, you know, come towards you a little bit. But what makes this game difficult is that, you know, one hit and you're dead. There's no life bar. And the enemies will just come out of nowhere. They don't all start from the top. You know, they'll come from the sides. And when you are in a cloud, that is where I died most of the time.
Because
I'd be in a
you
cloud
go under the cloud.
Yeah, you go under a cloud. You can't see yourself. And oftentimes enemies will start their route from under a cloud. And you'll just die. And the only reason you'll know is you'll hear there's a little Japanese sound when you die. There's a Japanese, voice sample when you come back in. Yeah, it's just one of those, you know, and you can tell they're trying to be Japanese and anime.
Yeah. They were too. All the cutscenes, everything is very Japanese.
Yeah. And so this is boy, you know, as long as you don't really spend a lot of time with the arcade game, I think that you'd be happy with this. Like, if you're a guy playing this, like this was released also on the cover of Amiga, one of the Amiga magazines. It was a cover CD.
Wow,
back,
a freebie?
You know, it was a freebie.
Holy smokes!
On one, you know, this is very late in the Amiga's life, where the cover disc had gone by the wayside, and they had cover CDs, and you know, you'd be extremely happy with this. But if we're comparing this to the arcade version, it really falls flat because the stages are so incredibly long.
Too long.
I mean, you can play, I think, you know, I got to the boss once, And I was so happy. I texted you on Discord. I sent you a picture of me at the boss. I was like, I did it one time, and I immediately
To be fair,
died.
you were leaning back in your easy chair with your booties on there playing.
Yeah, there might have been a cold one involved as well.
Yeah.
So and when you play the arcade game, I mean, first of all, it moves faster. And you get to the end of the stage quicker. I mean, you get to the end of the stage, and it's no big deal to beat the first boss, okay? And that's what you want. We say this over and over again.
Yeah.
Give me the feeling of accomplishment early on in a game. That's what keeps me wanting to play the game. Other things, the power-ups in this game, they leave off almost all of the power-ups that are in the arcade version. In the arcade version, you get like a little doodad, like it's almost like a little ghost figure that can follow you along.
Yeah.
That's super cool. In the arcade version, when you die, your ghost will start to fly off the screen, and you can respawn and connect with your ghost and pick up all your power-ups where they were before. That is something that is sorely missed in this game, because when you die in this game, you lose everything.
Yeah.
Speaking of the power-ups, you get basically there's a power-up, there's a speed-up, there's a shield, and there's a fire beam. Those are the 4 power-ups, okay? You can get bells that say power-up, but there's no indication on your screen about how powerful you are. I would have loved to be able to see that, because like it's nice to have a visual indicator of where your power meter is, because you could be like, well, because I'm sure at some point you can collect enough power to where you max it out, and then you're like, well, I don't need to bother with trying to kill myself trying to get these bells anymore, because my power is already at the max.
Yeah.
You don't get any of that in this game, and much to its detriment. So
what did you think about the old hold the button down for the bigger fire gimmick until it runs out?
I can tell you,
that?
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
But it
runs out.
I would have liked to have seen. I would have liked to have seen a charge shot that was not that you had infinite amounts of, that wasn't as powerful as the fire beam, and then move the fire beam to the second button.
Yeah,
that's
I agree.
what I would have preferred.
I agree, because that was really surprising the first time I did it. I was like, what's going on? I will say I recommend the 2 buttons on this one, so you could have it. I don't know how I handle it with 1 button for the terms of the dropping the grenades.
Right.
What did you think about the bombing? It's the bombing. One thing that's unlike Xevious, the game that this is sort of semi-based on. Xevious, you perpetually have like a reticule or a targeting thing for your bombs. In this, you don't really get one until you're throwing the bomb.
Yeah,
and
the reticule is almost useless.
Bizarre. It comes up after you've already thrown the bomb.
Right.
So all it does is show you where you're going to bomb, where you want to bomb next time in relation to where you're at. Now you can get better at bombing, but you have to take some time to get used to it. It was pretty weird.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The bombing, it does feel really tacked on. The enemy character, unlike the arcade version, at least in the first stage, the enemy characters on the ground don't attack you. So you're just sort of doing it for points. And in a game like this, I mean, I almost feel like I would rather not play this game for points and just try and see what's back there. Because in my perfect world, what you have is a game that's somewhat completable, and then you go back and you play it for score after you've mastered getting through all the levels.
Yeah, I couldn't even think about doing scores on this. It was too hard. I wasn't nearly good enough to do that. But I mean, I will say I like the idea of like bombing stuff for fruit and stuff to up your health. That's pretty cool. And you can get stuff that way. And there's a ridiculous amount of stuff you can bomb. There's so much that you can't even come close to bombing at all. There's no way. So you just have to sort of pick and choose and hope you hit something, basically.
Now, I've been really negative about this game, but this is actually one of my favorite Amiga shooters. Because it's just so much. It brings so much more to the table. And a part of this is because it's such a late release. I mean, by 1998, shooters had come a long way. Now, is this game better than Hybris? No. Hybris still reigns supreme. But is this better than like what that one game that everybody loves?
Banshee?
All those rock. Is it better than Banshee? Yes.
No.
I think this is 100% better game than Banshee.
I don't think it's better 100%. Than Banshee. Because Banshee, especially at later levels. Man, listen, they're almost incomparable if you want the truth, because this is yes, it's cute. Okay, yes, it's the weaponry's odd, right? But it's almost, this is a strange. It's a shooter, but it's a different vibe. It doesn't feel like, it doesn't even feel like something like a Banshee or a Swiv. It's got it's a different sort of cat, and on its own feet, by its own standards, it's a pretty fun game. And the fact that these guys didn't do much else on the Amiga, it's sort of a shame because, I mean, clearly they're skilled. These guys that put this together, I mean, it's a pretty game. It doesn't run as fast as the arcade. That's something I do find odd, that it runs so slow. I'm assuming that's because of the bell gimmick. Mm-hmm. They don't run it as quick.
There's a lot going on the screen.
There is, and sometimes there's too much. When you get a bunch of bad guys on the screen that are shooting, plus you're bombing, plus there's crap bells floating around, it gets real, and there's berries and crap. It gets real confusing. And so I guess that's part of the reason why they run it so slow, because I'm sure the Amiga could have made this move quicker. So I'm going to go on the assumption that that's for gameplay purposes. But that alone makes it a lot different than a lot of games. And different's good. It's good in this case. Right. I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would, because I'm not the biggest fan of these cute-em-ups. But this actually, really the bell is a big part of that. And the fact that it's Xevious-like is an alert to me. So I like this. I mean, it's got mid-boss battles. It's got huge boss battles at the end. There's one of the options on the menu is to change the level, but I could never get that to work, so I'm assuming that you have to get to the levels to change them. So the saddest part of this game is that I didn't get to actually physically play most of the game. I wasn't good enough to get there because it's so hard. I'd love to have like some sort of level swap or cheat to where I could at least see more of the game.
Yeah, and I mean,
what I saw, I liked.
If this would have come out in, say, like 1992, with the release of the AGA chipset, and this could have been a real showpiece, and it would have technically been possible too, because the game had already been out for a year in the arcades, then we would have been dealing with this. Would have been, I guarantee you, this would have been one of those games that people would always talk about being their all-time favorite on the Amiga.
It's a different game. It's a fun game. Again, I can absolutely see why this didn't come to the States, because it's definitely not the kind of game that would get over in the U.S., I don't think. But in Europe and Japan, absolutely, because they were more into this sort of thing. So it was a surprise. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I didn't get a lot of in there because this wasn't really commercially released. I didn't find a lot of reviews. However, Amiga Format in December 1998 did review it when it was on the CD cover, and they gave it an 80%.
You got to then.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair score. What year did you say that was?
98. 98. Same year that it came out.
That's a low B. I would put this in the B area. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's, like you said, it's not at the tippy top of shooters, but it's something that's so different that makes it interesting and fun.
Yeah. We did get some Discord reviews as well. Pajako6502 writes, "Don't let the cute graphics and theme fool you. This game is brutal. It's not that the enemies are difficult to kill, but when you have to juggle bells to power up while trying to shoot them, but not too much, and avoid enemies and bullets, it's all a little overwhelming from the off. Sadly, you can spend ages building up your speed and power and then lose it all in an instant, which, like any shooter, can be a massive hindrance in the game. And due to the random nature of the bell colors, building back up can be a chore. The clouds are a little too big and can get in the way, which is pretty bad when there are a ton of baddies and bullets on the screen. None of this makes it a bad game, just a tough one. The game runs at a really nice pace, the graphics are fantastic, and the audio is great, and overall, this is a great homage to Twinbee. Homage. But if you are new to it, be prepared to put some serious time in to get good. 8 out of 10 from Pajako.
Be prepared. Get it?
Yeah. Mitsuyama writes, "A lot of care and attention has gone into making this game. A nice intro sets the scene. The graphics are colorful, detailed, and well drawn. The music is great, and there are lots of different tunes. Having support for a 2-button joystick and the option to set the game to NTSC mode so that you get silky smooth gameplay at presumably 60 frames per second is the icing on the cake. This game oozes quality. The gameplay itself, however, is rock hard. The game doesn't break you in gently. You are up against it right from the start. The difficulty comes from having so much going on at once, juggling the bells to try and collect power-ups while shooting the enemies and ground targets as well as avoid their bullets. It can feel overwhelming at first. The power-up system can be infuriating. You never know what order the power-ups will be offered or when the bells will turn black, and when you do eventually get the bell color you're looking for, you occasionally have to watch helplessly as it slides off the edge of the screen before you can collect it. Losing your power-ups when you lose a life is perhaps understandable, but losing them between levels is just cruel. I assumed that the arcade game this is based on, Bells and Whistles, would be just as hard, but I found that it actually plays a lot easier. I don't understand why the developer chose to make the Amiga port so hard. Perhaps it's a case of not enough playtesting by people not directly involved with the development. With that being said, the game does reward patience and perseverance, and after a few goes, I'm able to reach the boss on level 2, but I've not managed to reach level 3 yet. If you're looking for an Amiga shoot 'em up to sink your teeth into, then this might be worth spending some time with. 8 out of 10.
He got further than I did, Bode.
Yeah.
That's for darn sure.
Me
yeah,
too.
He's right there. We didn't even mention the music. I thought the tunes were upbeat and fun.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
The ones I heard anyway. I'm sure there are more that I didn't get to hear. Like I said, at the end of the day, I just wish I could get further in this thing than I can. But I will say, we talked last night, and we were talking about getting to that first boss. I did get to the first boss multiple times. I didn't get past him. And by the way, you think to yourselves, oh, they got to the first boss, what a bunch of geeks. Good luck. You get in there and do it. It ain't that easy because the levels are so long. And that's something else. They need to cut these levels in half. How many times have we said that on this show? About a million. Cut them in half. Have it end after that first sub-boss. You know, and then just like do it in stages. Stages. What's the problem with this? Just do it in stages, man. But I mean, those things aside, I think it's a big winner. But I enjoyed it. Oh, we should mention while we've got it up here, just to show off the differences between the arcade and the Amiga version. This makes it look worse than
again,
it is.
like if you look at the speed of the scroll,
the
speed of the scroll is almost the same.
Yeah.
But it's just the speed of your craft is you have so much more velocity.
Plus if you're listening on the radio, in the arcade, your ship is augmented by like 30 things. They're so much more powerful. Like the ship you've got in the Amiga version, it basically just lumbers along with basically nothing.
Yeah.
Which was one thing that was weird.
The size of the clouds makes such a difference. I mean, they're twice as big in the Amiga version.
Yeah, although even the whole bit about going under the clouds, but I don't know, man. I never like a game where you lose track of your craft or your guy.
Oh yeah, it definitely adds to the challenge.
It reminded me, like, was it Supercars 2 where you go through the tunnels, and when you're in there, you're screwed. So if you're wrecked or something, you're boned. But look at the multiple layers. For listening at home, I mean, the arcade version, it has really is attractive for the age it came out in. You know, the Japanese are just the absolute best at making these beautiful shmups with all the stuff going on. There's waterfalls, there's chasms, there's pits, there's little houses. It's all this beautiful stuff.
Right. It really makes you feel like when you put a quarter in that you're getting your money's worth, because even if you suck, you're at least going to get some great visuals.
Absolutely. So if you haven't played in the arcade, Bells and Whistles, I would give it a whirl. And I really think you can enjoy them both. They're not totally dissimilar, but I think they both have something to bring to the table, Boat.
If you ask any Amiga repair technician what the most problematic component of a motherboard is, they'll undoubtedly mention capacitors. The electrolytic capacitors that shipped with the Amiga are 30 years old or older at this point, and each one is a ticking time bomb waiting to explode battery acid all over your motherboard, sometimes damaging it irrevocably. Don't wait. Replace your capacitors now. Full capacitor kits for every Amiga model are available now at RetroRewind.ca. Don't want to attempt the repair yourself? Use their white glove recap service and leave the intricate removal and soldering process to the professionals using industry standard equipment. Use the promo code Amigos10 at checkout and save 10% off your cap kit or service. Remember, make RetroRewind.ca your first stop for all your Commodore computer needs.
Amiga News.
All right, Aaron, we got two news stories. Sort of a slow news week this week, but there are rumblings in the Amiga community. Up first is the head rumbler, the one and only Chris Edwards.
There's always rumblings in the Amiga community, Bo. Come on.
Chris has repaired a lot of machines in his time. I don't know that he's ever had one quite this bad before.
Oh man!
I'm gonna refer directly to the description here. He says that this was an Amiga 2000 that came with the old shtick. It worked the last time I used it. You heard that one before, Aaron?
Oh yeah, many times in the arcade too, many times.
So
Oh,
I'm just gonna give you a quick rundown of what he found, okay? And I'm sure this is not all. Got 12 volts on a 5-volt rail. The power supply plugged in backwards. Melted Agnes lines. There's 32 fried RAM chips. I mean, and so this is just he said this is the result of 3 months of repairs to get this thing working again.
Man, this is what I would have chucked right in the old trash, or I'd sold this on eBay. A condition unknown, brother. You know what I mean? We talked about this before the show. The power and backwards and all this stuff. 32 RAM chips. I just saw a big, huge piece of lamb that was all jacked up, and the chips blown. Like I've worked on, like when I worked for IBM, they decided to get into the laptop business briefly. Lexmark did. It was a spinoff. And so we had these boards that no matter what happened, we had to try to make them work. And it was very similar to this, because some idiot would hook them up to the tester wrong and blow up half the RAM, and it'd be crap smoking and broken chips. It was a disaster to work on these things, and that's what this reminded me of. And of course, Chris is out of his mind. I mean, he'll do it. Man, I hope this dude bought you a beer or something when you finish this up. But yeah, this is one, I don't do this anymore, and I don't have the patience to do it anymore. That's why it's fun to watch some other guy. I don't want to say sucker, but I'm going to, because you got to be a sucker to work on something like this, brother. I'm sure that Chris Edwards and Frank over at RetroRewind could exchange horror stories about these hideous things that they fix on a weekly basis. That's why I'm happy to be out of the game, bud. I don't need that, brother.
Oh, yeah. And our other, of course, a friend of the Amiga community, Doug from Dynamic Commuting, has released a new 10-mark video, 10-minute Amiga Retrocast. He, too, has purchased a new Amiga keyboard from our friend and sponsor of the show, Simulant of Amiga Addict magazine.
Yeah.
Tell us about this one, Aaron.
Well, of course, I mean, one thing I will say
Doug is destroying this box.
Well, no, actually, it came pre-destroyed. That's one of the things he talks about. And, some people, let's put it this way, if you pay X amount of dollars for something, you would like it to come intact, right?
Yes.
And so when I think intact, I'm pretty easy. I just want whatever's in the box to be intact. And it is, it's intact. But some people want the box to be pristine as well. And it's understandable, man. You're paying the big money.
Yeah.
And one of the things Doug mentions is that this thing, they didn't put this thing in a box. They shipped it as is with no outer box, boat. You know what I mean? And Doug's like, that's no good. Doug also takes this out, hooks it up, uses it on his PC, and it works fine. Then he tries hooking it up to his Amiga, and he does run into some problems with I think the caps lock stays on, some other couple weird things. Now, when you're hooking a USB component up to an Amiga, you're going to get, I don't blame the keyboard per se. It's just the Amiga's doing a lot of silly pet tricks to get this thing to work. You know what I mean? So I'm sure it's something goofy. I don't think it's got anything to do with the keyboard. But overall, Doug puts the keyboard over. I mean, if you look at it, if you're watching at home, you can see it right there. And if you're listening to the radio, it's a beautiful sort of cream-colored keyboard with the Amiga logo in the upper right-hand corner. The keys, for the most part, match what an Amiga keyboard looks like. Doug actually puts them together so you can sort of compare and contrast. You can see the buttons are a nice, beautiful white, bright white compared to your old keyboard. The gray's pretty close. It's not perfect, but I mean, again, I don't know when you buy a keyboard like this, but you're sort of an independent third party. You don't care. Like, what do you want? If you're going to buy something like this, are you looking for an exact duplicate of your old Amiga keyboard, or do you want something in the spirit of? Which one do you prefer?
If I have a if I have a sort of saying for life, it is in the spirit of. Okay,
Yeah.
and the reason why is because you don't want something that is exactly the same, because time has moved on and things have gotten better. Okay, And so, like, if you can make something that gives me the same warm, fuzzy feelings as the original thing, but it adds some extra functionality in there,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what this keyboard does. It's got the light, it's got the same sort of indicator lights, and the keyboard looks the same, but it's USB. You can use it for any computer. It's still got the logo on there. I am 100% in favor of the In the Spirit of.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it actually looks real sharp. If you want the, I think it looks better. I mean, honestly, he also comes with additional keycaps, including a help key. If you want to put that on your keyboard, I mean, you know how keyboards are. You can pretty much configure them to do whatever you want. So if you want to make this if you're using this straight up for like emulation, for example, you could put the help key on there and get rid of one of the keys that the Amiga didn't have, and have your help key on there, for example. It's got the Amiga keys on there as well. We've talked this keyboard a few times. And it's a sharp-looking keyboard. Is it a pricey keyboard? It is. But as we know, when you're getting this stuff made, brother, it don't come cheap. And I know for a fact that this thing this was no easy task to get these things made up.
Yeah.
And so I doubt there's a whole lot of money being made per unit, if you know what I mean. This is pretty much a service to the Amiga public at large. So if you're interested in getting a USB solution, I really do suggest you watch Doug's video. That's one thing I like about Doug. I mean, he'll give you the straight scoop. He goes in and does crap that I wouldn't even think to do. And this is another good video. But Doug's excellent at these product reviews. And Doug's a good guy, too. So if you haven't checked out Doug's channel over there, it's 10 Mark. Look him up on YouTube. He's everywhere, Boat. There you go. Hey, one more thing I wanted to mention before we move off the news, Boat. I've been in touch. Some of you may have mentioned or noticed that last week I mentioned this, that the new a Mini Amiga OS is available for Mister now from miniamiga.com. If you go over to the webpage, you can download it. I think you picked it up, and I've got it. I got a question on I did a stream last week, which I'll talk about in a second. One of the questions I got, Boat, was if he was ever going to port this to this setup to an actual Amiga, which is, I thought to myself, good idea. I talked to him, and he's actually almost finished that up. Cool. So there'll be an actual Amiga build of the Mini Amiga setup sometime in the next couple weeks. But if you haven't went over to check out his stuff, give it a shot because he's got some good stuff. While we're at it, but let's just go ahead and move right into the site updates real quick, and we'll talk about it. So we had a big week, Boat, of stuff. I mean, we were busy boys this week. Let's talk about, Boat, just real quick. The first thing we did this week was a rare 1200 XL show on Congo Bongo. We had a lot of fun with that, didn't we, Boat?
It was good.
Yeah, very much fun. We also recorded an Ask the Amigos, which is out now. If you want to hear the burning questions, about an hour of Ask the Amigos. That was a good time. Then me and my brother, the Brent, did a ARG Presents last week on the Commodore PET. We had a real good time playing Commodore PET games. We played a board game called Acquire on the PET, and we played a game called Lawn, where you mow your lawns. So check that out. And then lastly, this just went up last night, Boat. I've cobbled together video of every game on the Amiga that runs in ham mode. Ham mode, Boat. I know you were dying to know what runs in ham mode. I had to consult the Hall of Light, but I made a video of this. So if you're interested to see what kind of games run in ham mode, this might be the video for you. Over on the stream team, we also had a busy week, Boat. We had, of course, I mentioned my Mini Amiga Mister stream that I ran last Friday. Ran a couple hours just playing games straight off the Mister with the Mini Amiga set up, and it was great. Really enjoyed that. Myself and the Brent also had an unboxing this week. I just hot off the presses. I know you people in Radio Land can't see it, but I'm sitting right here. I got myself an MSX2, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
For those who haven't seen it, and I got a little multi-card for it. I want to thank the boys over at Pixel Gaiden, Eric Nelson, and Sanction for helping me get my feet wet and figure out what's going on with this thing. They really set me up, and check their new episode just dropped. So check them out in our network at Pixel Gaiden. That's a really good show. We also had the return of 48K RAM with streams by 48K RAM, where he got himself one of these Naboo computers, Boat. Have you heard much about the Naboo?
The Naboo is the new hotness. Everybody's
It's everywhere,
talking about
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's everywhere. I'm like, what's the scoop on this thing? I don't know. Find out. Check out streams by 48K. our good pal Jack Flack, fresh off his van video, which I urge you to check out. Big Rob's Van is the channel to check that out. He's got a video up called Sprite Castle Talks Kong Off 3. This is where he talks about his visit to the Kong Off boat. It's a very interesting video. I urge you to check that out. Everything Flack does is great. He streams every Wednesday night on Twitch, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then lastly, another in the series of Happy Coding ZX's Home Cooking. He's working on his new game and doing his thing. I've got a couple more of those ready to bounce up there, too. So we should have another bumper crop of stuff. If you have not checked out the Amigos Stream Team channel, I'd urge you to check it out. And if you would, give us a subscription. We'd appreciate it. It's sort of the sister channel to our Amigos Retro Gaming channel, Boat, on YouTube. That's pretty much all we've got, Boat.
What do we got coming up next week?
Let's see, shall we? Oh, man. Global Gladiators, Boat? Does that mean anything to you?
I cannot wait for this game.
Is this like a Captain Planet?
No, this is like McKids.
Oh, this is the McDonald's game?
Yeah.
So we're finally going to play this after all these years.
That's
Holy smokes. I can't believe it. Well, now I am excited about that, but that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Good stuff. McDonald's. I'm going to have me a Big Mac or something while I'm playing, just to make it work.
Me too. It's a crack the egg into the bowl. We're going to do that. All right. All right. Guys, thank you as always for listening. We want to thank a special shout out to our patrons, patreon.com/Amigos Podcast. If you want to watch us live, twitch.tv/Amigos Retro Gaming. We'll catch you guys next week for Global Gladiators. Until then, adios.
Adios.